Neil Gaiman's Good Omens comes to Amazon in a brand new limited series. I'm Zach Laws of Gold Derby, and with me now is Ann Oldham. She's the makeup and hair designer on this six-part limited series. And Ann, just take us back to the beginning. I mean, when you first got involved with this, were you a fan of the original book? Was it something that was brand new to you? Tell us just a bit about your initial involvement in it.
Embarrassingly, it was brand new. I wasn't really aware of the book particularly, but as soon as they called me and asked me to get involved, I read it immediately, and of course it was fantastic. So very exciting, very different to anything I'd done before. So I was really, really flattered that they offered it to me. So yeah, a really very unusual, and as I said, something I'd never done before. So loved it.
Well, I mean, you are a three-time Emmy winner, and your work, like you said, I mean, this is something that you haven't really done before. Because if you look at your Emmy wins, they're for things like Downton Abbey, Jane Eyre, Emma. So, I mean, this is way outside your wheelhouse. What did you think when you first read it? I mean, what were your initial ideas for it?
Well, it was interesting because when I went before I went for my interview, they just sort of said, "Can you just come up with some sort of ideas?" But they didn't tell me who was going to be involved as far as like Michael and David. So I just wanted to look at really slightly odd and out of the box designs, because I thought if I wanted to do it, I just wanted it to be quirky and slightly unusual. And so we went for the interview, and they seemed to like that idea, the fact that I was thinking outside of any normal restraints and just quite bonkers ideas, really.
Well, I guess what were some were there influences or other films that kind of inspired you? You know, some things that maybe sparked your imagination.
I didn't look at any other films that were in that same sort of genre, because I didn't want to steal any ideas, and I also didn't want to get scared about the fact that amazing work has been gone before me, and I would be well, as I said, scared about being bold. And so it was funny, because when I spoke to Douglas, my director, he immersed himself, and I did completely the opposite. But somehow between us, we sort of gelled in the middle, which was lovely. But the ideas just came from everywhere, because we could start from the beginning of the world to now. So we literally stole everything and mixed things up. And so we didn't have one particular look. It was just a hodgepodge of ideas that were thrown together. And Douglas and Neil being, the marvelous man that he is, and with his such an incredible imagination, just embraced the whole thing. So it was just wonderful.
So then, take us through that hodgepodge. I mean, tell us just a bit about the ideas for starting with the two main characters, Michael Sheen as the angel and David Tennant as the demon.
Well, we started off with wanting them to look very different to how they normally look, because David has a particular look, which you see him quite regularly. And also we did want to embrace the angel and the demon side of life. So it was lovely that both of the actors engaged very much in the fact that going very blonde for Michael, and then going crazy red for David. And then what we did is Michael wanted to stay. Once he'd got his look, his character sort of bedded into the look and stayed very much the same throughout, except for the flashback periods. But David was more wild and just wanted to be like, he would embrace every single area, every era that he was in. So we changed him around, and then so that they looked very different, but complemented each other.
In terms of makeup for those two guys, I mean, it's very subtle, but I mean, were there things that you did to sort of augment their features, or?
Not really, because we found with the red hair and the blonde hair, they were very, very striking in themselves. And then, of course, with David, we because he came from being a serpent, we put lenses in, so he had serpent lenses, and he just had a little tiny serpent tattoo here as a sideburn, and then that was it, really, because Neil also asked me not to make them look funny. because the humor should come from the piece. So we wanted to make them look distinctive, but not sort of overly amusing.
Right. Well, certainly the hair color, not just for those two guys, but for everybody in the show, is very colorful and elaborate, and the styles are all over the place. Can you just talk a bit about designing some of those? I mean, how did you find the right balance of, as you said, not going too extreme, but also kind of having some fun with it?
Well, some of the when you got a pollution, for instance, we had a lovely actress, and she's she was very, very dark, and we decided that we'd make her very dirty blonde. And War was, again, she had a red zone of her own. There were it's an odd thing. It sort of grows. I do a lot of thinking when I'm driving, so I'll have a particular character in my mind, and I'll be mulling over, and I look a lot at different references. The internet is brilliant because you can go to any period you wish, and so you're really sort of slightly stealing ideas and mashing them together. And sometimes I look at a finished thing and I really am not quite sure how I got there. It just sort of moves on. And also I do like to very much involve the artists as well, because when you're doing something sort of odd like this, they need to sort of feel right in the piece as well. So there was a couple that just went, "Are you sure? Do you not think this is a bit weird?" And I'd go, "Yeah, but let's go, let's do that." And so everyone had a sense of bravery as well, which was I think quite needed at the time.
Going back to your influences, I meant to ask you this earlier, but Neil Gaiman's work is so heavily rooted in mythology and things like that.
Yeah.
If not necessarily certain movies, did you look at certain myths or things like that as a way to spark your imagination?
No, I didn't at all. And now when I think about it, I wonder if I should have done, but I actually didn't. And although there was one character, and forgive me because I can't remember who it was, but I think Neil just said to me, "You do realize this character is aquatic?" And I'd offered him something that was quite like wormy, I think. And I'd gone, "Oh no, I didn't know," because it really is an area that I'd had very little knowledge. So I think my ignorance was bliss.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out like what in the world did you Google or what did you look at in order to like
Well,
come up with this stuff?
I know, it's weird, isn't it? Well, things sort of came off the page. So because he's so descriptive, so I would take a character like the two. So Hasta and Liga are two very odd characters because they're sort of reptilian, but they take on sort of a slightly human form as well. And so I was looking at, I found a Japanese tree frog, which was so beautiful and so sort of weird that I decided to offer it up as an idea as a reptile for Hasta. And we gave him black eyes, and for some reason it sort of worked. And then his sidekick Liga, what it is, I used a chameleon. So the chameleon started off blended very much to Arian's skin tones, so it didn't really show. It was sort of as a chameleon would be. And then for some reason we just decided it would be really good to go, it would change color when he got angry. So the more pissed off he got, the crazier the color of the thing became. And then we added lenses, so by the end he was furious, but so was this thing on his head became sort of a monitor of the mood that he was in at a time. So I don't know, I'm just looking at things. I went through Pinterest as well, and lots of books, and there were just things that caught my eye. And what I did is I made a little like a storyboard or a little mood board for everybody, and from there we sort of mashed ideas together.
Working with like
a
the
bit random, but yeah, it is random the way it came together, really. And
Yeah.
also I have a fabulous team, and I always open up to, if you're surrounding yourself with creative people, you mustn't stifle that. So I had a lot of brilliant people around me that came up with quirky ideas as well, and we just went, "Oh yeah, that sounds nice." And it was lovely that that Neil just, I don't know, just liked what we were doing, which was really encouraging.
I was going to ask as well, speaking of working with people, did you work with the costume department at all in terms of like colors and things like that to get ideas?
Yeah, I think it's always very important to be as one, because you're creating a whole. So if you don't have a good sense of what the other department is doing, you can get something that doesn't look quite right. It's a bit disjointed. So it's very, very important that you all the time, if you have a change of idea, you go to them and say, listen, I've gone a bit off piste here. Is that okay with you? And they would come, with some amazing bit of netting that you'd steal, and you say, oh, can I have that for one of my characters? And so it's very much a blending of their ideas and ours.
Was there a character that was particularly difficult for you to come up with? I mean, you mentioned the aquatic one, but I mean, was there something or?
Difficult. Well, it's odd because things like John Hamm, for instance, they said he's got to be the most beautiful, man in the world. He's playing Gabriel, and you go, well, he is already.
What more can I do? Yeah.
What can I do? So what I did, it was so tiny, but what I did is I gave him Elizabeth Taylor eyes, because she, in her time, was the most beautiful woman in the world, and she had violet eyes. So I did little things like that just sort of, they're tiny, but they, I think, are really, really as important as something that's very big and sort of flamboyant.
Right. I mentioned your Emmy wins earlier, and I see you've got them in the background there along with your BAFTA.
I'm sorry. I'm in my study. I'm sorry. I didn't.
No, don't be ashamed. I was going to ask you about, and this goes with the BAFTA as well. What did that kind of recognition mean for you?
It's really a little gobsmacking, to be totally honest. It's very, very difficult to describe. It's very, very flattering. It is lovely to be recognized by your peers. But I still sort of think, how come? I don't really, there is I don't know, it is a little bit weird, because when I started in this business, I never thought I would be in a position that I would even be considered for awards. So I've been more than blessed. I've been spoiled, really, haven't I?
Yeah. Well, I mean, according to your IMDb page, you've never lost an Emmy. So, I mean, that must be sort of a...
No, I know. It's slightly embarrassing, because I turn up and nobody knows who the hell I am. Who is this comes and snatches this award and then goes home again? And who is she? So, but I'm, very, very flattered that, the American Academy, has enjoyed what I've done, which is lovely.
Well, before I let you go, now that you've, dipped your toes into this sort of fantasy realm for the first time, do you have any desire or plans to go back into it?
I think it's always the script for me. So now I've dipped my toe in, I suppose, yes, it wouldn't be a horrible idea, would it?
No.
It was, and I like to just be tested in whatever I'm given. So as long as I'm pushed, but yeah, I'd go again, I think.
Well, Anne, thank you so much for your time, and congratulations on your work.
Thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
And thank you to all of you at home for watching. Make sure that you hit the subscribe button below, and make sure that you visit us at goldderby.com for all the latest Emmy news.